Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, use the hashtag Rising Woman Leaders. Follow me on Instagram at Meredith Ram and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com to get all the new and inspiring content. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Maggie Miner, and she believes that what we surround ourselves with has a profound effect on our subconscious, and that by simply making a few changes in our home decor, we can uplift ourselves and open up our mind to new possibilities. She is the founder of Maggie Miner Designs, a resource for room designs and artwork that provides bold women with the resources to homes and offices that inspire them. In her former life, Maggie spent almost 15 years traveling the world as a graduate student in Australia, a student and backpacker in Europe, a Peace Corps volunteer in Bulgaria, and a humanitarian worker working in Asia and Africa. Her memoir, Adventures of a Curious Sculptor, recounts her long journey from adventurer to artist and her appreciation for all of the beauty that surrounds us. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm curious because it seems like you have just had such adventure in your life, moving into these different places. And I particularly just was curious about your time living in these other countries and being a Peace Corps volunteer. And my sister was actually a Peace Corps volunteer, and we visited her in Kazakhstan. So often they send you to very remote places. And I'm curious about that time in your life and also how you see that time in your life informing who you are today.
I've reflected back on my Peace Corps time a lot in the past 10 years because when I got back from because it's difficult, it's beautiful and really difficult. And I found that, if it wasn't for the Peace Corps, a lot of really important things wouldn't have happened in my life. Because the thing about the Peace Corps is that you're given very little direction. I mean, they really help you out at first. They put you with a host family for the first 3 months, and you get amazing language training. But then they kind of just drop you in a random place, and you have the people, the organization you've been assigned to, and you have housing and you have all the things that you need. But you're kind of like a squirrel dropped from a tree, and, you aren't fluent in the language yet. And so you're really forced to find out what you're made of. And so a lot of people drop out in the first 6 months. That's when most people drop out. And, but if you stay, you get this fabulous education into who you are. Because you're completely, you're put in a place where you have no remnants of your past. All you have is who you are. And even the other Peace Corps volunteers that you become friends with, because that becomes a very tight bond, even if they're far away, it's really amazing, is that, you kind of get to know who you truly are. And you're really put to the test, and you're really scared when you get there. I was in Bulgaria, which actually a lot of people call Posh Corps. because it's in Europe, and it's kind of a second world country. It's not really a third world country, and now it's part of the EU. So it changed a lot when I was there. But you get there and you don't know how to get anywhere. Most everyone loses weight when they first get there because they don't know how to get food. Because everything's behind a counter in most small towns. So, if you don't know the word for something, then you don't get it. Like you can't order it. It's not like they don't have that many mainstream grocery stores at the time when I was there, mainstream grocery stores where you could just go around and go shopping. Like you actually had to know the name for, chicken fillet. So you learn very, very, very quickly. And then by the end, you're like taking 4 buses to go across the country to go visit your friends for the weekend. And you're talking to people on the street and, so, I mean, it's a huge test, but it's also a huge confidence builder. And so, it's very imperfect, but yeah, it really builds character. It is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think being in those uncomfortable places is often when we have the most growth and we really learn to believe in ourselves and see what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been amazing what I've brought back with me. And I later found out that that's actually why John F. Kennedy developed the Peace Corps, was because he wanted people to go abroad and bring back the information. It was much more about the bringing back than it was to giving to that country.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in bringing it back, you give almost more because I then became a humanitarian worker, and I had such I could feel the difference in my understanding of what was going on in countries because I had the empathy. Because I'd been friends with people who had to have gardens because they couldn't afford to eat or had to bribe a doctor to get, medical care, or, my neighbor who had tuberculosis, so it was, even some of my colleagues who had lived abroad in kind of more of an expat situation, it's very, very different from being a Peace Corps volunteer where you're really integrated into the community. So I found that it made me do my job better. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have so much compassion and understanding, a little deeper understanding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I know that you just made a big life transition. You just, drove across the country. I'm curious if you could tell us just what prompted this, and particularly about this idea of like taking a leap, like stepping into the unknown. What has that been like for you? And, what are you learning from that right now?
Well, I guess I actually have to go back a few years to answer that question because, so when I was in my early 20s, I was really good about kind of following my intuition, and just going with my gut. I would almost say I was fearless in a lot of ways, and the universe really met me halfway. I decided I was going to go to graduate school in Australia, and it just kind of all came together and got paid for. And I made great friends there, and things kind of lined up. And then when I went out into the working world as a humanitarian worker, which was still an office job, I got a lot like what you describe. I read parts of your book of what you describe in your book, like just very, my body was very tense. I had back pain. I was deeply unhappy. And I kept feeling like my life was going to suddenly arrive at some point. This is more me than you. I was going to arrive at some point, and it just didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. And I was so frustrated. Anyway, I essentially had a breakdown. And, um, and during that time, and looking back, what I realized is that I wasn't following my gut. I wasn't following my intuition. And so I moved to North Carolina for 5 years to do a deep dive, essentially into resolving, things that had weighed upon me very heavily from my past. A lot of forgiveness work, and a lot of kind of finding out who I really am underneath all of the stuff that I was carrying around that wasn't really mine. And so during those 5 years, I was living in a place that I slowly began to realize wasn't aligned with who I really am. It was a great place to heal, but not a great place for me to flourish. So I knew about a year ago that I needed to move. This was in Asheville, North Carolina, but I didn't know where, and I really felt very stuck. And so I made a really profound decision, which was to only follow my gut. And things didn't really change very much at first, but I did feel much more in line with my body. Like every day seems to be better and better. And so it's a long story about how I came to San Francisco, but essentially I had gone to visit my brother who was in the country. So I went to our parents' house, and he kind of offhandedly said, well, why don't you move to San Francisco? And I had been thinking about it. And I actually said something snarky to him. But then when I was driving back, I just knew, I just knew my whole body relaxed. And I was like, oh. And it still kind of took me a while to absorb it into my body, because it was something I had never thought about. I had lived in Europe, and I thought about going back there, but I'd never thought about living on the West Coast. I had some really weird stereotypes about the West Coast, which I'm finding are true and not true. But it, the universe was kind of gave me a really strong sign. My rent went up by $600. And I just looked at the number, and instantly I knew. I was like, I gave my 30 days notice within, to my apartment within 3 days. But I knew right away I was going to do it. And I decluttered I gave away 2/3 of my stuff. Which was a huge emotional cleanse, by the way. And then I stored, the things that I really cared about, and got into my car. And, it was funny because the money and the things I needed just kind of started to show up in my life. And I felt like, I remember driving in my car through Tennessee, and I was driving through the remnants of Hurricane Harvey. Actually, I had been so busy doing what I was doing that I had not checked the weather forecast. So it was a tropical storm by that point, but it was still really bad. And I was, the warning, that hideous sound that comes over the radio when there's a tornado or that was coming up my car, and it was raining, and there was I was stuck in traffic because there was 2 tractor trailers had overturned on I-40 on the opposite lane, and all this crazy chaos was happening around me. But at the same time, I had this overwhelming sense that I was going out of the chaos and going towards where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
It's really amazing, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's this tarot deck I use a lot. It's called the Osho deck. And there's this one card called Intensity. And it's this pinpoint focus of being in this triangle, and you're just moving forward with such momentum and direction. But it's almost like everything around you is just chaos or flames, but there's that one pointed focus that you're moving to.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the first time in a long time that I felt really aligned with the
Mm.
universe again. And
Mm.
and since I've arrived, I've, it's been scary, and a lot of big decisions I'm having to make at the moment, but I've never felt more like I was on the right path. It's really great.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone out there is listening and feeling like life is getting hard, like things aren't working, something is telling them that like something needs to change, but they're kind of afraid of making a big change, like what advice could you give to them just around like following their heart or connecting to intuition or taking a leap?
Um, I would say that you always know the right answer. Um, there's this breathing exercise, which is similar to what we did before we started the call, that I've seen Tony Robbins do, and I actually I can find it actually and put a link to it if you want. Which is where you have your hand on your heart and you breathe through your whole mouth, and you think about the three moments in your life, you go through them, where you feel the most alive, the most connected to yourself. Um, and you go through it slowly, and you breathe, and you do a lot of breathing, and then you ask yourself the question. Um, I might get this wrong, but you know, you ask yourself the question that you've been needing to ask yourself, and almost always the answer comes. It's really amazing. I really think that if we align ourselves with our bodies and really relax and let the fear go out of our bodies, um, that all of the answers will appear. And they're not always the answers we want, but they're always the right answer.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah. And I heard I don't even remember where it was. I was listening to some YouTube video lately, and someone said, when you follow your gut, you're actually taking less of a chance than if you uh, uh, if you go into the fear, because the universe, if you go with your gut, the universe will always catch you.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that profoundly affected me. Like yeah,
That is really powerful.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited to try this and just, yeah, it's so true. We always have the answers, and it's just so nice to have that reflection because I think we forget it pretty often.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I have definitely found myself uh, cursing after some of those sessions, like, oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I imagine it wasn't easy, like getting rid of 2/3 of your staff. You said it was kind of an emotional purge, and
Yeah.
like, how does it feel now?
It feels amazing.
Mm.
Um, and it's been really interesting because it's really set me up for what I'm doing now. Um, because I found that decluttering my well, because I went through a process,
Mhm.
um, and I got there's so many great resources for decluttering out there, and so I kind of read books on it, and then I took all of the things that I learned from all of these other resources, and I kind of combined them into my own thought process. And it was what I would do is go through each object in my house and really think about, is this going with me to the life that to the fulfilled life that I'm going to be living. And does this object bring up negative emotions in me? And sometimes I would stop because I realized that I hadn't dealt with the emotions that were connected to the object. And then I would actually have to go through some forgiveness exercises of whatever had happened. Or I would put it aside, or put a couple of items aside because they were associated with a person that I needed to resolve something with. But essentially, the big picture thing that I learned throughout the whole process was that the objects that we have in our house are incredibly emotionally charged. Even like generic artwork is emotionally charged. Things that we buy to numb ourselves or to fit in. Because when you look at that, and I've done this too, you buy it just to have something in your house, but it kind of makes you feel a little stagnant. But essentially, when you're buying it and you feel that way, you're bringing that energy into your house. Mm-hmm. So I got rid of anything that made me feel stagnant or obligated was a big thing. Anything that made me feel like I should be something that I'm not. And a lot of that was tied to my family because I was never the perfect debutante. Mm-hmm. Southern debutante like I was supposed to be. And anything that made me feel guilty, or gosh, so many emotions came up. I could talk about this for hours, but and it included furniture, and it included things that I think the scariest thing, people don't want to get rid of big things. Like I gave my couch away to restore. I don't know if you have that out in California, but it's like it's like Goodwill, but they mostly deal with furniture. And just because it had gotten all tattered and it smelled like a dog, and it just wasn't coming to my more abundant life. But I think people get scared of the void, because when you get rid of so many things, then you have to deal with the emotions that come up when you don't have these things that are cluttering your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so then what happens is a lot of people, and I've done this myself, is that then, they go through these decluttering exercises that are so popular right now, but then they turn around once they have this void and they fill it back up with things that don't make them feel good. Mm. So it's been really interesting to move after I've gotten rid of all of my stuff. And I'm actually living in someone else's space right now. And it's very uncomfortable. Mm. But it's really good because it's making me figure out what I really want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the positive effects like that it can have on us when we do create the environment that makes us feel good, and any just of your tips around doing that.
Oh yeah. So I think people I've asked a ton of people, about what their struggles are with decorating and making their space into a positive one. And the number one thing people say is they get overwhelmed because they think that they have to redecorate everything. Mm-hmm. But what I found through personal experience is that if you focus on the couple of spots in your home, and there's really only like 3 or 4 that you look at the most that are within your line of vision. So for instance, so where you look when you're sitting on your couch. Mm-hmm. So you look, some people look at their television, and then what's on the side of the television, because your peripheral vision is always feeding into your subconscious. So, choosing artwork or pieces of furniture that are affirming, that make you feel joy on a deep level. And it doesn't have to be a comfortable joy. It can be a complex joy. So, because I think that good art that's going to bring your vibration up is always going to challenge you just a little bit, because you see it differently every day. But I think people often choose artwork or photographs that are like flatline joy, if you know what I mean, like cute, a scene of just two people kissing or something that they think that everyone should feel like that kind of thing, and that everyone should feel like that is the important part of that. Like the photograph could actually really be meaningful to them. And so but there are other spots in the house, I would say, the place that you look at when you come in the front door, and what you look at first thing in the morning, and before you go to bed, which is generally the same place. And your bedside table too, because that's one of the spots that you look at. So the lamp that you have on your bedside table should be something that makes you feel inspired and joyful, and then what you look at when you eat. So those are the main spots that I've found. And so I always advise people to just pick one of them and see how it makes you feel. I myself started with this revelation happened for me when I changed the artwork in my bedroom. I took down, I had these beautiful instruments hanging on my wall that I had gotten in Zimbabwe and Uganda. And I just hung them up because I had them, and they're really interesting and they're great conversational pieces. But what I realized is that I was feeling stressed out in the morning. I meditate in bed too, so it was really affecting my meditation practice. But I didn't realize what was impacting my impacting my meditation practice. But what was happening is that I was waking up in the morning and I was looking at these instruments, and I wasn't taking in that they're beautiful. I was taking in my experience of when I bought them. And so when I bought them, I was really stressed out. Because in both instances, one, I was in a former war zone in Uganda. I was in northern Uganda. And the second one, I was in Zimbabwe working on sensitive things in a highly repressed regime, where if you make eye contact with guards at the president's palace, and they'll pull you over and interrogate you. So, I was bringing that into my bedroom and into my meditation, because you're absorbing everything around you subconsciously, all the time. And once I did that, I took it down and I replaced it with one of my prints that I really love. Like, it's one of the ones that I'm most proud of, and it has tons of color. And I changed out my boring lamp to one that was colorful, and then I changed out what was on my dresser to a piece of artwork that had a joyful experience from when I bought it. And the effect was really amazing. I felt so much more centered and joyful when I woke up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what did you decide to do with the instruments? Because I think sometimes we feel like we can't give those pieces away. What ended up happening there?
I kept them and I put them in a box, because what I realized about them was that they're part of who I am in a positive way. But what I haven't done is made peace with, oh gosh, I hadn't never really thought about this. I need to make peace with the fact that I put myself in physical danger. that I took those assignments,
Yeah.
you know, because that's a form of self-harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to resolve that before I can have them displayed in my home again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are your tools for resolving those kinds of emotions or stories?
Well, I would say the first thing is, Marie Kondo talks about this in her book. Uh, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget the title, The Art of Being Tidy or something like that.
The life-changing magic of time.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But I like the beginning of how she talks about it. You hold the object in your hand, and her question is, does it bring you joy? And I actually think that the question should be more thought provoking than that. I think that it should be a blanket statement like, what does this make me feel?
Yeah.
And I think you should do it when you're in a calm state, like do some breathing exercises, take a deep breath, exhale, and do that at least 3 times before you pick the object up, especially if you're in an agitated state. And ask yourself what it makes you feel. And if a word doesn't come up, which is fine, there's probably going to be an image that's going to come through your head. And really think about that image. Is it someone giving that object to you? And when they gave you that, if that's the image, so we'll just use this as an example. If that person giving you the object makes you feel good, it brings a smile to your face, then I would say move to the next step. If that person just kind of is someone that you've had to have in your life because they're a family member, but you don't really, you'd rather not, then I would say that you need, to go to go to another step. So the next step after that is always, do you even like the piece? So if you don't even like it, like it goes in the bin. But if you don't, if this is such a good question, and I'm going to write a worksheet about this now, is that, so if then I think you need to go through forgiveness exercises. If the object hasn't gone through, hasn't said, yes, this is from a person that I really like, and yes, I really like this object, keep. And if it's from a person you don't really like, or you don't really like it, I think you have to resolve both of those issues. Like, you need to really think about the instance in which that person was giving you that object. Like, I had some objects in my house that were really beautiful, this vase in particular, but I was given it in this almost forced way. Like, it was a housewarming gift, and it was like, here, this is your vase. This is what the feeling behind the person giving it to me was, this is how your home should look. This is how I think your life should look. Because your home is a reflection of your life, right? So when someone is giving you an object to be in your home, then they're essentially telling you, and they can have good or bad intentions, is how your life should be. And it's an indication of how much in alignment that person is with you. So I think you have to resolve, how you feel about that person. And I think there's some really good forgiveness exercises that you can do around those, that we can go into if you want to as well. But if I would definitely recommend that if someone felt like they were buried in clutter, and they had gone through at least one round of decluttering their stuff and they kind of felt overwhelmed, there's this amazing forgiveness course by Ayanna Van Zandt that I took that was life-changing. And she actually teaches you how to forgive.
Mm.
And she teaches you the principles behind why you don't forgive and how you take unforgiveness on as part of your personality.
Mm.
Um, and when I was going through all of these objects, I was actually using a lot of her tools that she taught me. So
Mhm.
you have to get, there's two major parts of forgiveness, and they are, you have to allow yourself to get angry,
Mm.
like angry, to the degree to which you were, to which you were when the action actually happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have to discover, so behind anger is always hurt. So then you have to go into the hurt.
Mm.
Why did this person hurt you? Um, and then you have to go through the acceptance that this happened. Um, that it will, and you have to accept that it's not going to change.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and by the way, women have a really hard time. Uh, we don't give ourselves permission to feel angry, and men don't give themselves permission to feel hurt.
Mm.
So it's funny. It's like but they have to go together.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
Yeah. It's deep
it,
work.
yeah, it's deep work. And it's funny because our culture tends to think of our home as our decor as such a kind of um, shallow thing.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not at all.
Yeah.
What we surround ourselves with it says a lot about us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if you could just share a little about how you work with people and what that looks like when you're helping someone design their home or their office or all of that.
Well, sure. Yeah. So the first thing I do is that I ask them to write down um, the five emotions that they want to feel when they are in that room.
Mm.
Um, and normally, people will write down something that's kind of one of the big emotions, like happy or um, and so then what I'll do is I talk them through it and really drill down into more specific emotions. Um, what's the heart of how they want to feel in that room. And then generally that will lead into the next exercise, which is, what do you want in your life in the next year or the next 5 years? Like, what do you want to happen? Because I think that um, Marie Diamond said this in a video I saw her do. She's from The Secret, and it was just like I actually stopped in my tracks when she said this. And she said, "Our homes are a three-dimensional vision board.
Mm.
So if we design our space to be in alignment with what we want,
Yeah.
then we're going to get there quicker. It's going to create flow in our lives, right?"
Yeah.
So after I've figured out how they feel and where they want to go, um, then we start kind of getting, it's like an organic thing, so it's different for each person. But then we'll start going through the space and taking out things and doing the decluttering process and taking out things that are not in alignment with that.
Mm.
And do some emotional resolution. Um, and then once, and then we'll kind of discuss, how the room is, what furniture is in the room, and how they're using it in a practical way. is like the question I ask a lot is, is this chair serving the purpose? What purpose is this chair, serving? Is it, and then I'll dig deeper into what they want. And then once kind of everything has a place in that vision, then that's when we start to add things. Because so I want people to add enough add enough positive things into their space, back into their space after they've decluttered, so that they feel like the vacuum has been filled with positivity and more alignment. So that, and I don't want that so that they don't feel like they need to fill it with other stuff.
Excuse me.
Bless you. But I don't, at the same time, I don't want to fill it with so much stuff that they feel overwhelmed by their new vision. Like, it's got to be all about alignment. So it's really very much a dialogue.
Yeah. It kind of makes me feel like, how can anyone do this alone?
It's like having a room coach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything that you are excited about coming up in your business that you want to share about? Anything that you want to speak to?
Well, I have a couple of things that have come out in the last year. I wrote a book about my being a humanitarian worker, which you mentioned at the beginning, which is Adventures of a Curious Sculptor, which I'm really excited about, and I love sharing with people. But also I started designing, because not everyone can go through this process, with me one-on-one. So I started designing rooms online, like a blog post that will have a complete set of furniture picked out with artwork and accessories, partly so that people can kind of visualize how a positive room should look, but also for people who are busy. They can go to a room to see this room design and say, oh my God, this aligns with how I want my home to feel. And they could just buy the whole room. But the big thing about my room designs is that I integrate a lot of color. And I believe that color is really important, because so much of the home decor industry just kind of goes to beige. And in my mind, beige is the equivalent of emotional numbing. I noticed that we're on video for those just listening, and I noticed that Meredith has tons of color in her living room, which I love. But yeah, color is it's kind of hardwired into our brain to bring out emotion and inspiration, and it reminds us of nature. So I think that's really important, and I like to show people how they can integrate more color in a balanced way into their homes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what's
cool.
happening for me. Lots of exciting stuff, and I'm researching another book. Yeah.
Yeah. Is the new book about home design?
It's essentially about, it's going to be about taking people through the process that I was just discussing, kind of on a step-by-step journey, and showing them the little things that they can change in their house to make them feel more aligned with how they want their life to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love the tips you gave around just like the pieces that you look at the most often in your home, and then also this emotional piece, like finding resolution with the things in your home. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, it's been a joy talking to you, and I feel like we could probably go on for, more time, but I just feel like, I want to hear any closing words from you, anything that you feel like could just be of support to anyone listening before we close out this call.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I feel like the biggest thing that people need really love hearing is that uh, don't be afraid to follow your intuition. To use your own judgment when it comes to your life, but in particular your home. It's okay to discard things you don't like.
Yeah.
It's okay to, choose artwork or furniture that brings you joy, even if your friends don't like it,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, because your home's about you.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, this brings me to one more question, which I feel like could be helpful for someone. When you're sharing a space with someone else, have you had any thoughts around, you know, just any navigating that? Because sometimes you share a space with someone and you're like, I don't know about that thing or
Yeah, yeah, it often becomes lopsided. I've had, and I'm single right now, so I haven't had to deal with that in the couple past few years. But yeah, I think it needs to be a negotiation. I think the most important thing is that there needs to be a dedicated conversation to what's particularly in your common space. So your living room if you're living with a roommate, and your living room and your bedroom if you have a partner. Um, and just, ask the questions, how and some men aren't going to really respond to how do you feel about this duvet cover. But I think a general thing is just to kind of ask, do you like this? And um and I think there's for women, I think there's this need to please, and I've seen women who have made their bedrooms completely masculine, um, because they're trying to make their husband comfortable. Um, but I think, I this is just me. I think that for bedrooms in particular, it's important for women to feel really, really comfortable, um, because that is your most intimate space in a home. It's the most intimate space in your life.
Yeah.
And so I would say that I think that women should. I would advise, particularly women, to really take that space, by the horns, and really tackle that one. And when it comes to their significant other, is um, to ask to not ask permission, to just ask them if how comfortable their significant other feels with certain aspects of the room. Um, because to be perfectly frank, like, if a woman feels comfortable in the bedroom, the man is going to get more sex. Or the woman, and so I think it's also really important to kind of phrase it like that too. I mean, just don't set the mood.
Yeah, we want the
So,
women to feel comfortable in their bedroom.
exactly. So I think it can be a compromise, but it also is kind of, you need to keep your cup full in order for you to be able to give. And
Yeah.
for a partner situation, I would kind of use that philosophy. For a roommate situation, I would use the dedicated conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think both have their place, but yeah, just be intentional about your dialogue about the space.
Yeah. That's great. Oh, thank you so much, Maggie.
Thank
Just,
you.
yeah, bringing my hands to my heart with gratitude. Just so sweet to have this time and to share and to hear all your tips around psychology and home design and travel and intuition. I feel like there's so much I'm taking away. So thank you so much. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.